Hello everybody and welcome to another video. And I'm so happy you're all here. I know it's been a little while since I've done a really solid Beatles video, but I am prepared to blow your mind today. Yes, I've got a special guest with me today who's going to be showing something and explaining and talking about something that's very cool in the Beatles world, and I think you're all going to love it very much. Now, you've met my dad before. He's been a guest before on my channel. But I have to admit, on my channel, I don't bring in too many guests. Probably because there's not too many people that want to hang out with me. And I'm kind of just left languishing on my own down here in my parents' basement. So that's basically what I do. But I do have a special Beatles guest today. Yes, folks. You've heard me talk about him in past videos. He has had items featured in several of my videos. Who remembers the video I did not too long ago about Ringo Starr's personally owned tour shirt? Remember that video? And also during that video and past videos, I've talked about my piece of John Lennon bath towel, which John used personally in Surrey when he lived there in the late 60s. Who remembers that? Well, do you remember the name of that individual who gave me all those goodies and items? Well, I do, and I know many of you do. Jim Cushman. So I'd like to bring in Jim Cushman right now. Jim, come on in. Great to see you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so happy to have you here
folks.
in my basement studio here in the Matt Street channel. Oh, this is great. Jim is a authoritative Beatles expert. I'm willing to say that. I don't know if he would say that. Maybe he would say that.
No, I won't say that.
Beatles expert extraordinaire. I mean, I told you all about the Magical History Tour show that he's involved in heavily and organized and donated artifacts to. Been all over the country, all over Canada. Great show. We've talked about that. But Jim is going to be doing something special today with us. But before we do that, Jim, can you just give a little background about your history with the Beatles? How did you become a fan?
Well, basically, it was February 9th, 1964. I mean, growing up as a little kid in Massachusetts, where I'm from.
Yeah.
Top 40 radio, Transistor, 1963. Beach Boys, Leslie Gore, all that stuff. And then in the early 64, we heard that there was a group from England. I saw it on Bandstand that the Beatles were coming. Yeah. And everybody watched American Bandstand. And everybody watched Ed Sullivan on Sunday nights. And on February 9th, 1964, myself and my family, along with 73 million other people, watched the Ed Sullivan Show, and nothing's ever been the same. Nothing has ever been the same.
You were off, and that's it.
Started off collecting the bubblegum cards, the magazines, all that stuff, the 45s, the albums. I mean, I was just obsessed.
So you basically started out collecting many of the things that most of us as kids collected, the basically mass-produced stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know, items you can get in the stores, records.
Yeah.
But you've taken it to a new level, as you all know, with some of the things you've seen Jim gift to me, which is more than generous. You took it to a level of going beyond just the mass-produced stuff. You went into a more serious collecting.
Well, I've been collecting since 64 when I was a kid, though, Matt. But when, around 1985, I started collecting seriously, started picking up autographs, personal items, things that they owned, things that they touched, things that they wore. And it's just kind of blossomed from there. And that's what led us to our museum exhibition.
So the items, the Beatle items you collect now, what are they known as or officially called? These items?
Well, most of the stuff that I have are personal items.
They're called personal
items, yeah. Those are the biggest sellers. Handwritten material, autographs, personally owned items, worn items, ticket stubs, concert memorabilia. Those are the biggest.
Awesome. So we're going to have a little special episode today where we're going to talk about Beatles autographs. And you've been collecting Beatles autographs for a long time now, right?
1985, yeah.
Do you remember the first set of Beatles autographs you ever got?
Yes, and I've got it right here, Matt.
Oh, and he's going to be showing it.
That's a coincidence.
So I'm going to bring in the piece in closer for you to see this, but we have a wonderful set of early Beatles autographs. I don't want to give too much away. I'm going to let Jim talk about this piece for a moment here, and then I'll give you a chance to talk to the audience, tell them what this is, and then I'll bring it in for a close-up.
Well, what you're looking at here, you want to take that up there,
yeah,
is my well-loved 1962 Parlophone Records promo card. Those were printed up by their label, Parlophone Records, and it came out in October of 62 to coincide with the release of their first album, Love Me Do. So these things were printed up. They were postcard sized, and they would send them to Brian Epstein, and the boys would go into the office, in Epstein's office, and they would have signing sessions. And they would sign the cards on the back, and then they would take them to the local gigs, and they would give them out to anybody who wanted them. But this is one of the earliest sets of autographs with Ringo Starr as the drummer.
And this is the actual front side of your actual card.
Very well loved. Very well loved.
All right, so maybe you
want to show it to them there, Matt?
Yeah, let me show you these autographs, folks. And maybe you could tell them, Jim, they're very unique looking, these signatures. They don't look anything like the later Beatles signatures.
Well, this is, around that time, when you're on your way up, you have your own sort of, you're trying to find your autograph style. And if you look at this, George Harrison has a unique G, and he's signing his last name Harrison with a lowercase h, which he did around this time, late 1962, and they're very rare. John Lennon, if you look at his J, it's a regular cursive J. His signature and George Harrison's signature didn't change until around March of 1963. And the Paul and the Ringo autographs basically have stayed the same.
All these years there, too, have stayed very, very close to what they are now, yeah. So there they are. That's the back side of that card, folks. It looks pretty beat up. Where do you think the person kept this thing who had this?
Probably somebody's wallet. What they would do is that they would sign them like that, and then they would take them to the dance. Most of the time, a girl would get one, and she would ask Paul to sign it, so he would sign it to Mary, love the Beatles. And
just want to make sure everyone can see you.
So usually when
if it was
like
a girl,
this,
he would personalize it?
Yeah, if you were a fan of George Harrison and you said, George, my name's Mary, would you sign it? So he would sign to Mary, love George, or love the Beatles. But when you get one like this with just the 4 signatures with no salutations, chances are it was from a guy.
Wow.
It was given to a guy.
Very cool.
But these things are really tough to find in any condition.
Yeah.
And considering this thing's almost 60 years old.
Wow, imagine that. 58 years old.
Yeah, the cool thing is when they signed it, they all touched this too.
Amazing. All 4 Beatles touched that card. That's
cool.
Blows my mind. That is so cool. And so you have some other stuff you were going to talk about too. Like, how can someone tell... Or want to do them by order of what we have
Sure, you can do that there.
So what is this one showing? These aren't actual Beatles autographs, by the way, folks. These are copies. Jim's going to explain some of the nuances of Beatles autographs to you. That is the actual set there, obviously. But what is this one we have here,
Well, as
Jim?
you can tell by looking at that one, Matt, you can tell that John has found his style. He's got his J is different. George Harrison's signature is different, but Paul and Ringo's. But those are from 1963, 1964.
Okay.
But that's basically what the Beatles autographs look like through the rest of their career.
All right.
Now, there was no way, though, Matt, that the Beatles could, when they started to really catch on in 1963, that they could possibly sign everything that everybody sent to them. So what they did, these are done by the late, great Neil Aspinall, who was their road manager. Neil would sign these. Somebody would come to the stage door and say, will you get me the Beatles autographs? And he'd say, sure, I'll be right back. He'd sign them and give them to the fan, and the fan was happy about it. It wasn't a case of deceiving anybody. There was really no market for the stuff then,
right.
But it was just to satisfy the demand.
Right, right. And he was pretty close on his signatures. He did
his Ringo was the best.
Job.
Now, I know a lot of people, though, Matt, that get these. These are publicity photographs sent out by the fan club. People would write in for autographs, and they would get these in the mail. They were done by an auto pen machine. They did these from 1963 to 1968. And they're all first name signatures, which is rare because the Beatles rarely, if ever, signed just with their first name.
Right.
Sometimes these were signed with blue ballpoint pens, and sometimes done with blue and black. And they leave an indentation on the photograph. And a lot of people think that those are real, but they're not. They're done by the auto pen. They're done by the fan club.
Okay. And what was this one here?
Now, this is what you get when you join the fan club. This was sent out saying thanks for joining us and all the usual salutations, and it was signed by somebody in the fan club. And a lot of people think that these are authentic, and they're not. Just to show you the differences, and if you have any of these are not authentic.
Okay.
Now, this next picture was sent out by the fan club. Those are real examples of their signatures, but those things are stamped on. Those were sent out by the fan club as well.
All right.
Now, here are some autographs from later on. This is John Lennon from my collection. This is John Lennon from 1975. It's a beautiful signature. He signed John Lennon, best regards, and it's an excellent example from that period from 1975. This is Paul McCartney from 1997 when he was on a tour of California. He was with his late wife Linda, and he was helping promote her vegetarian frozen foods. That was signed in Los Angeles.
Pretty recent, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now you can see George here in the late 80s and early 90s, how his signature changed, how it became more curving. But that's a beautiful example from George Harrison from the late 80s, early 1990s. And Ringo. Ringo he hasn't signed since 2008 when he came on and said peace and love, no more
Peace and
autographs
love.
because people were selling it. He would sign his full name until late 1992. Then he started signing Ringo with a star, and now he just signs Ringo. But now he won't do it unless you.
You gotta.
Yeah, you got to buy some of his
beg.
artwork.
You
got to buy some
it.
of his artwork. That's what I was going to say. And this is what the promo card looks like if it was in great shape.
Yes, that promo card back there, folks. Jim's personally signed card. When they're brand new, nice. This is a copy of what it would look like.
That picture was taken by Deso Hoffman in Abbey Road Studios on September 4th, 1962, the day the Beatles recorded Ringo's version of Love Me Do.
Yeah. Oh, great. I mean, this. We're going to show this again, folks, before we cut this video, but what's the best thing for people to do, Jim, if they're getting a Beatles autograph? What just a couple of
Matt,
issues you think they should look at?
It takes years. You have to study. You have to study. There are two places that I bought a lot of my stuff from. There's a guy named Frank Caiazzo.
Yeah.
The Beatles Autographs in New Jersey. He's the number one guy. The number one Beatles autograph expert. He's got a website. Look it up. He's got stuff for sale. Frank is the best,
and all authenticated.
Oh God! If it's got a letter from Frank, or go to California.
Yeah.
A man named Perry Cox, out in California. He's fantastic. Or a place over in England. It's called Tracks. TRACKS. .co.uk.
Yeah.
And they're the best in Europe when it comes to Beatles autograph and memorabilia. It's fantastic. And 6%, Matt, of Beatles autographs are deemed to be authentic. The rest are deemed to be forgeries because they are some of the most expensive autographs. And when the price goes up,
you
the
think
forgery.
of all the people out there that have autographs thinking, I've got a Beatles autograph. I mean, for many years, folks, I had this fan club little thing I think I've showed you in the past, my little fan club card here with their first name signatures on it. When I was a little kid, this was given to me in the early 70s, and I thought I had the Beatles autographs. Didn't take long. After a few years, I figured out it was just a printed fan club card, basically.
Card, right.
Yeah. So you think of all the people out there thinking they have Beatles autographs authentic. You hope they're getting proper authentication of these things. You hate to see people get ripped off and taken for a ride.
If somebody comes up to you and tells you that they have an album signed by the Beatles, forget it.
Really?
There are about 140 known signed albums worldwide.
That all four Beatles.
United States. The rarest ones were the American ones, because when the Beatles came to America in 64, 65, 66, you couldn't get anywhere near them. So Neil Aspinall signed a lot of stuff. And so a lot of the stuff that came out in America between 64 and 66 were signed by Neil Aspinall. Wow. You couldn't get anywhere near them. In 62, like this, in 63, you could still get to them. You could still possibly get an autograph. But once they came to America in 64 and took over the world, you couldn't get anywhere near them. So they were locked away.
Yeah. There you go, folks. An authentic set of Beatles autographs in 1962, vintage.
One of the earliest sets.
One of the earliest sets known.
With Ringo.
With Ringo, yeah.
On the back of a power.
Great stuff. Well, thanks again, Jim, for this little
thank you very much, sir.
Tour down Beatles Road here with the autographs. Really appreciate Jim being here for this first video, and we're going to try to squeeze another video in right now. So hang in there and come back for part 2. Bye-bye.